Rain hammers the road as a poor black single mom grips the steering wheel, gas light blinking, phone buzzing with messages asking where she is. She's late to pick up her son, late enough that the one neighbor helping her might say no next time. Then she sees him, an old white man stumbling along the curb, soaked through, briefcase dragging, shoes slipping on wet pavement. Cars rush past like he's invisible. If she stops, she burns her last dollars in gas. If she stops, she risks her job, her childcare, everything holding her life together. She slows anyway. 1 second, one choice. She pulls over and unlocks the door. Get in. I'll take you home. He looks up, stunned. Rain dripping from a coat that doesn't belong on this street. What she doesn't know is that this stranger carries a secret powerful enough to change her life forever, and neither of them sees it coming. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The old sedan's engine coughed and sputtered in the pre-dawn darkness. Marissa Johnson turned the key again, her breath visible in the cold morning air. "Come on, baby," she whispered, patting the dashboard like an old friend. "Just one more day." In the back seat, 8-year-old Eli slept peacefully, curled up under his favorite navy blue hoodie. The streetlight caught his face, so innocent in sleep, and Marissa's heart squeezed. He deserved better than this. Better than watching his mama count pennies for gas. Better than falling asleep in a car before sunrise. The engine finally caught with a wheezing rattle. Marissa checked the gas gauge, the warning light burning bright orange against the dim dashboard. She'd have to choose between filling up the tank and buying groceries. Again. "Morning, sweet boy," she said softly, adjusting the rearview mirror to see Eli stirring. "Ready for another adventure?" Eli yawned and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Can I have breakfast at Mrs. Green's?" "Sure can. She made her famous oatmeal yesterday." Marissa navigated through empty streets, the headlights cutting through lingering shadows. The truth was, Mrs. Green's oatmeal meant one less meal Marissa had to provide, one less worry about keeping food on the table. The eviction notice crinkled in her purse, a constant reminder of how close they were to the edge. She hadn't even opened it yet, couldn't bear to see the final warning in black and white. Mrs. Green was already awake, her porch light warming the darkness like a beacon. The elderly woman opened her door before they reached it, wrapped in a worn floral housecoat. "There's my boy," Mrs. Green said, opening her arms as Eli rushed to hug her. "And there's my hard-working girl." Her sharp eyes took in Marissa's exhaustion, the worry lines around her mouth. "I brought you some soup," Marissa said, pulling out a container from her bag. "Made it yesterday." "Child, you need to keep that for yourself," Mrs. Green protested, but accepted it anyway. She knew Marissa's pride, knew that giving made her feel less like she was just taking. "I'll be back by dinner," Marissa promised, kissing Eli's forehead. "Be good for Mrs. Green." "I'm always good," Eli said with a grin that made both women laugh. The office building was dark when Marissa arrived, joining the other cleaners filing in through the service entrance. She tied on her apron, filled her cart, and started her rounds. Empty cubicles stretched into shadow. Family photos and corporate motivational posters her only company. Sarah, a new girl barely 20, looked pale when Marissa passed her in the break room. "Forgot my lunch again," Sarah mumbled, embarrassed. Without a word, Marissa pulled an extra granola bar from her bag and left it on the table. She remembered being that young, that hungry, that ashamed. The morning shift bled into afternoon, fluorescent lights replacing dawn, as Marissa changed into her cashier uniform at the grocery store. Her feet already ached, but she managed a genuine smile for each customer. "Let me help you with those," she said to an elderly man struggling with his bags, even though her manager, Mr. Peterson, was watching with disapproval. "Customers can handle their own bags, Johnson," he called out as she returned. "That's not in your job description." Yes, sir, Marissa replied quietly. But the next time someone needed help, she gave it anyway. Her mama had raised her right. Kindness wasn't optional, even when it cost something. The afternoon grew heavy with clouds, darkness gathering early. As her shift ended, Marissa gripped her steering wheel. The leather cracked and worn smooth by years of prayers. "Please," she whispered, turning the key. "Just get us home." The engine turned over, and Marissa released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. One more day. They'd made it one more day. Dark clouds rolled overhead as Marissa pulled out of the grocery store parking lot. The first heavy drops hit her windshield like coins, making her jump. Within seconds, the sky opened up completely, turning the world into a gray blur of water and mist. "Not today," she muttered, flicking on her wipers. They squeaked across the glass, leaving streaky arcs that made it even harder to see. She'd meant to replace them months ago, but there was always something more urgent. Food, rent, Eli's growing feet needing new shoes. The fuel gauge needle wavered just above empty, making her stomach clench. She'd learned exactly how far she could stretch that last gallon, knew every gas station that would let her put in just a few dollars worth. But in this rain, with the engine working harder, every mile felt like a gamble. Traffic crawled through the downpour. Marissa leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. Water pooled at the intersections, and cars threw up sheets of spray as they passed. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat, Mrs. Green's name lighting up the screen. Marissa's chest tightened. She was already running late, and Mrs. Green had been clear about needing to leave for her doctor's appointment. That's when she saw him, an elderly white man struggling along the sidewalk, one hand gripping a worn leather briefcase, the other braced against the wind. His suit, probably once crisp, hung heavy with rain. Each step seemed to cost him, his right leg dragging slightly. Marissa's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She should keep driving. She needed to get to Eli. The gas tank was running on fumes. Mrs. Green was waiting. Every practical reason in the world said to drive past, just like all the other cars splashing by. The old man stumbled, his free hand shooting out to catch himself against a lamppost. His briefcase hit the wet sidewalk, papers spilling out to scatter in the wind and rain. "Lord have mercy," Marissa breathed. Before she could talk herself out of it, she hit her hazard lights and pulled over to the curb. Her window hummed as she lowered it, rain immediately spattering her face. "Sir," she called out. "Sir, please, get in. Let me take you home." The man looked up, water streaming down his lined face. He seemed to be weighing his options, pride warring with necessity. Another car roared past, sending a wave of dirty water over his shoes. "Please," Marissa said again, softer this time. "This rain isn't letting up." Her phone buzzed again, probably Mrs. Green wondering where she was. The gas gauge needle seemed to sink lower just sitting there. But Marissa kept her hand stretched toward the passenger door, remembering all the times she'd wished someone would stop for her when things were hard. The old man gathered his scattered papers with shaking hands, trying to stuff them back into his briefcase. Marissa put the car in park and grabbed her umbrella from the back seat. She stepped out into the downpour, hurrying to help him. "Here," she said, holding the umbrella over him as she knelt to rescue a soggy document from a puddle. "Let me help you with those." His hands were cold when they brushed against hers, accepting the wet paper. Up close, she could see how his shoulders trembled, whether from cold or exhaustion she couldn't tell. His suit might have been expensive once, but now it was as worn as her cashier's uniform, the edges frayed and thin. Finally, he nodded, something in his proud stance softening. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice rough but cultured. "You're very kind." Marissa held the passenger door open, steadying him as he lowered himself into the seat. Water dripped from his clothes onto her cracked leather upholstery, and her ancient heater rattled to life, trying its best to push out warm air. The rain drummed against the car roof like angry fingers as Marissa navigated through the flooded streets. Her windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, and she had to lean forward to see clearly. Beside her, the old man shivered, his wet clothes leaving dark patches on her passenger seat. "I'm Henry," he said suddenly, his voice carrying an unexpected authority despite his bedraggled appearance. "Just Henry." He spoke with precise pronunciation, each word carefully chosen, as if he was used to people hanging on his every syllable. Marissa glanced at him, noting how his shoulders trembled. "Hold on a second," she said, reaching behind her seat while keeping one hand firmly on the wheel. Her fingers found the old gray sweatshirt she kept for emergencies. "Here," she offered. "It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry." Henry accepted the sweatshirt with slightly trembling hands. "You're very kind," he said, draping it over his shoulders like a blanket. "Most people wouldn't stop." "Most people should," Marissa replied, cranking up the temperamental heater. It wheezed in protest, but managed to push out slightly warmer air. "Where can I take you? What's your address?" Henry's brow furrowed. "It's near the old library. Or was it past it?" He stared out the rain-streaked window. "Take a right at the next light, I think. Or maybe—" His voice trailed off, and he shook his head. "I apologize. The streets look different in this weather." Marissa's concern deepened. She'd seen this kind of confusion before in some of her elderly customers at the store. The last thing she wanted was to drop him off somewhere random in this weather. She made a decision, turning toward the more commercial district where some businesses would still be open. The fuel warning light blinked insistently, and Marissa tried not to think about how much gas this detour was costing her. She had exactly enough to get to Mrs. Green's and back home. Or she had, before this unplanned rescue mission. Henry noticed the warning light too. "Oh, dear," he murmured, reaching for his pocket. "Please, let me give you something for gas." "No," Marissa said firmly, though her heart ached at refusing money she desperately needed. "I didn't stop to get paid. I stopped because it was right." They passed a lit-up pharmacy sign, and Marissa pulled into the parking lot. "Wait here," she told Henry. "I'll be right back." Inside the store, she counted out the last few dollars from her wallet, money she'd been saving for bread and milk tomorrow. Instead, she bought a cheap plastic poncho and a cup of hot tea from the store's coffee station. The cashier raised an eyebrow at her soaked appearance, but didn't comment. When she returned to the car, Henry was watching her through the window, his expression unreadable. She handed him the tea and helped him unfold the poncho. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it'll keep you dry when we figure out where you need to go." Henry wrapped his hands around the warm cup, studying her with sharp eyes that seemed suddenly more alert. "May I ask your name?" he said quietly. "Marissa Johnson," she answered, not knowing those two simple words would change everything. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the roof as they sat there, steam rising from the cup of tea between them. The heater hummed its weak protest, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the sky. In the glow of the pharmacy's fluorescent lights, Marissa checked her phone, 3 missed calls from Mrs. Green, and tried to figure out what to do next. "Mrs. Johnson," Henry said, sipping his tea with deliberate care. "I'm afraid I've disrupted your evening quite thoroughly." His words carried a weight she couldn't quite understand, but she was too focused on the practical problems at hand to dwell on it. "Don't worry about that," she said, though worry was exactly what she was doing. "Let's just focus on getting you somewhere safe and warm." She pulled out of the parking lot, the windshield wipers keeping their steady beat, as she searched for a solution that wouldn't leave either of them worse off than they'd started. The rain softened to a steady drizzle as streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. Marissa's headlights swept across an imposing building she'd only seen in passing, all glass and polished stone, with a covered entrance and brass fixtures that gleamed even in the dim evening light. "There," Henry said suddenly, his voice stronger than it had been all evening. "That's my building." Marissa pulled up to the curb, studying the elegant facade with surprise. The neighborhood was well beyond her usual routes, the kind of place where people had doormen and parking valets. She glanced at Henry, seeing him differently now. His wet clothes and confused manner had masked something she was just beginning to notice, a certain bearing, a way of holding himself that spoke of authority. "I can make it from here," Henry insisted, but his hands shook as he tried to gather the borrowed sweatshirt and poncho. "Let me help you to the door, at least," Marissa said firmly. She stepped out into the drizzle and hurried around to his side, holding the poncho over both their heads. The plastic crinkled as they walked slowly toward the building's entrance. Under the awning, warm light spilled out through tall windows. A doorman in a dark uniform straightened at his post, alarm crossing his face as he recognized Henry. He started forward, but Henry raised one hand in a subtle gesture that stopped the man in his tracks. "Sir," the doorman began. "It's fine, James," Henry said, his tone carrying quiet command despite his disheveled appearance. The doorman stepped back, though his concerned gaze didn't leave Henry. Henry turned to Marissa, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she met his eyes, seeing something there she couldn't quite read. Assessment, perhaps, or decision. His scrutiny felt weightier than the moment warranted, as if he was looking for something beyond simple gratitude. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, reaching into his wet jacket, "I want you to have this." He pulled out a simple white business card, somehow still crisp despite the rain. When she took it, she saw it held only a first name, Henry, and a phone number. No title, no company logo, nothing to hint at who he really was. "Call tomorrow," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "It's important." Marissa nodded, though she'd already decided the card would probably join the collection of well-meaning but useless papers in her purse. She'd learned long ago that promises rarely panned out, especially from strangers who meant well in the moment. "Thank you for your kindness," Henry said, and something in his tone made the simple words feel like more than routine gratitude. Marissa hurried back to her car, her heart suddenly racing, though she couldn't say exactly why. The whole evening felt surreal. The rain, the mysterious old man, this building that belonged in a different world than hers. She checked her phone as she slid behind the wheel, and her stomach clenched. 4 missed calls from Mrs. Green. It was well past when she'd promised to pick up Eli. Her hands shook as she turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, before catching with a whine that spoke of near-empty tanks and worn-out parts. The fuel gauge needle sat firmly on E, no longer even pretending there was anything left to measure. "Please," she whispered, patting the dashboard like it was a stubborn animal she could coax into cooperation. "Just get us home." Each intersection felt like a gamble as she drove, watching the darkened streets through a windshield that needed new wipers 6 months ago. Her mind raced with calculations, how much she'd spent on the poncho and tea, how many hours she'd need to work to make up for the lost gas, what she'd tell Mrs. Green about being so late. When she finally pulled up to Mrs. Green's small house, the porch light was on, but the windows were dark. Marissa's clothes were still damp as she hurried up the walk, rehearsing apologies in her head. "Mrs." Green opened the door before she could knock, her face etched with worry rather than anger. "I'm so sorry," Marissa started, but Mrs. Green just shook her head and stepped aside. There on her worn couch was Eli, curled up under an old Afghan, dead to the world. "Baby, Mrs." Green said softly as Marissa gathered her sleeping son into her arms. "You can't keep living like this." Pre-dawn light crept through Marissa's kitchen window, casting weak shadows across the wrinkled paper in her hands. The eviction notice was short, just a few paragraphs of legal language that boiled down to one brutal fact: pay up or get out. She'd read it so many times, the words had started to blur together. "Mom!" Eli's voice pulled her back to the present. "Can I have more cereal?" Marissa quickly folded the notice and tucked it under a stack of other bills. "Sure, baby." She managed a smile as she poured the last of the generic cornflakes into his bowl. "But eat slow. We've got plenty of time before school." Eli nodded, spooning cereal carefully while his legs swung under the kitchen chair. He was wearing his favorite superhero t-shirt, washed so many times the design had started to crack. "Are you okay, Mom? You look tired." "I'm fine, just thinking about work stuff." Marissa reached across the table to smooth his hair. "How about we read one of your library books tonight? The new one, about space." His face lit up. "Really? Even if you work late? Really? Promise." She'd figure out how to make it happen, even if it meant skipping dinner herself. Eli needed these small moments of normal more than she needed food. After dropping him at school, Marissa rushed to her cleaning job, slipping in just as her supervisor was handing out assignments. The morning passed in a blur of vacuum noise and chemical sprays, her muscles moving through familiar motions while her mind churned with numbers. Even if she picked up extra shifts, there was no way to make the rent deadline. The phone buzzed in her pocket around 10. Unknown number. Marissa usually ignored these. Bill collectors were relentless. But something made her answer. "Mrs. Johnson?" The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Ms. Pritchard, calling on behalf of Henry. He'd like to see you downtown immediately." Marissa's first thought was scam. "I'm sorry, I don't—" "You gave him a ride last night in the rain," Ms. Pritchard continued smoothly. "Bought him hot tea and a poncho at the pharmacy. Your fuel light was on the whole time, but you refused payment. Does that help confirm this is legitimate?" Marissa's hand tightened on the phone. "Those details. No one else could know them." Yes, but I'm at work. I can't just—" "Henry understands you have obligations. He's prepared to compensate your employer for any lost time. This is important, Mrs. Johnson." Marissa's heart hammered. She thought of the eviction notice, of Eli's worn shirts, of the constant tightrope walk between almost okay and disaster. "I'll need to make arrangements for my son after school." "Of course. The address is 1200 Market Street. They'll be expecting you in the lobby." After a quick call to Mrs. Green, "Child, what kind of trouble are you in now?" Marissa changed into the blazer she kept in her car for emergencies. It was second-hand, slightly too big, but better than showing up wherever she was going in her cleaning uniform. The bus ride downtown felt surreal. She watched the neighborhoods change through smudged windows, houses getting bigger, streets getting cleaner, until finally the glass and steel towers loomed ahead. Her worn sneakers squeaked on the polished marble floor of 1200 Market as she approached the security desk, feeling painfully out of place. "Mrs. Johnson?" The guard smiled like he'd been waiting for her. "May I see some ID?" She fumbled with her wallet, heat rising in her cheeks as she handed over her driver's license. The photo was 4 years old, from before she'd had to sell her good work clothes. "Perfect, thank you." He handed her a visitor badge. "Take the express elevator to floor 47. Ms. Pritchard will meet you there." Marissa's knees felt weak as she walked to the elevator bank. The doors were polished to a mirror shine, reflecting her uncertain expression back at her. She pulled Henry's card from her pocket, running her thumb over the embossed letters. Just a name and number. Nothing to explain why she was here. Nothing to hint at who he really was. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Inside, it was all wood paneling and brass fixtures, with a view of the city through a glass wall. Marissa pressed 47 with a shaking finger, watching the ground fall away as the car rose smoothly upward. Each floor that passed felt like another step into a world she didn't belong in, where people had corner offices instead of cleaning carts, where one phone call could rearrange someone's whole day. The card in her hand was warm now from her grip as the numbers climbed. 43, 44, 45. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. 46. The elevator slowed to a stop at 47, and the doors closed behind her like a vault sealing shut. The executive suite was hushed, wrapped in thick carpet and expensive wood paneling that seemed to absorb sound. Ms. Pritchard guided Marissa to a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Water?" she offered, already moving toward a crystal pitcher. "Yes, please." Marissa's voice came out smaller than she intended. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out like a map, buildings catching morning light. From up here, her neighborhood wasn't even visible, just a haze on the horizon where the nice parts of town faded into the struggles she knew. Ms. Pritchard handed her a glass of water, condensation beating on the outside. "Mr. Henry will join us shortly. Please, make yourself comfortable." Comfortable seemed impossible. Marissa perched on the edge of the chair, trying not to leave marks on the leather. Her blazer felt thin, her shoes scuffed against the pristine carpet. She sipped the water slowly, afraid of spilling. The door opened. Henry stepped in, and Marissa almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the drenched, confused man from last night. This Henry wore a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than her car. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture straight and commanding. But his eyes, those were the same. Clear, observant, weighing everything they saw. "Mrs. Johnson," he crossed the room with measured steps. "Thank you for coming. You look different." The words slipped out before she could stop them. A slight smile touched his face. "Yes, I imagine I do." He settled into a chair across from her, adjusting his cuffs. "First, I want to thank you for stopping last night. 7 other cars passed me. I counted." Marissa's mind struggled to make sense of what she was seeing. "You weren't really lost, were you?" "No." Henry's voice was gentle but direct. "I sometimes walk the city in ordinary clothes, without drivers or security. It helps me see how people truly behave when they don't know who I am." The water glass trembled in Marissa's hand as understanding hit. "So, I was part of some test? Some kind of experiment to see who'd help a poor old man?" Heat rose in her chest. Not just embarrassment now, but anger. "You could afford a taxi. You didn't need my gas, or my time, or—" "You're right." Henry cut in, not defensive but firm. "I didn't need help, but that's precisely why it mattered that you offered it." He leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Johnson, I've spent years watching people perform kindness when they think it might benefit them. They see status, opportunity, networking. What I look for is different. Someone who helps when it costs them something real." Ms. Pritchard quietly placed a folder on the table between them. "You spent your last dollars on tea and a poncho," Henry continued. "You burned gas you couldn't spare. You risked child-care arrangements you depend on. And when I tried to pay you, you refused." His eyes held hers steadily. "That wasn't a performance. That was character." Marissa's throat felt tight. "I did what anyone should do." "But they don't?" "That's the point." Henry opened the folder. "I'm not here to give you a reward or a handout. I'm here to offer you a path." Inside the folder were documents with official letterheads, course descriptions, certification requirements, financial summaries. Marissa's vision blurred as she tried to read them. "It's a training program," Henry explained. "Community Health Navigation Certification. You'd learn to help people access medical care, social services, housing assistance, all the systems that are currently failing your neighborhood. The foundation will cover tuition, child care for your son, and transportation costs during your studies. Marissa stared at the papers, her heart pounding. The certification was real. She'd heard of it, dreamed of it even, but the cost had been impossible. Why me? Because you already do this work informally. I've watched you, helping elderly neighbors, sharing information about resources, making sure people aren't alone in crisis. But you're doing it without support, without credentials, without sustainable income. Henry tapped the folder. This makes it official, gives you tools to help more effectively, creates a career, not just a calling. Ms. Pritchard placed a pen beside the papers. The initial commitment is 6 months of full-time study. The foundation provides a living stipend during that time. Marissa picked up the pen. It was heavy, expensive, the kind of pen that signed things that mattered. Her hand shook slightly as she looked at the signature line. "For my son," she whispered, pressing the pen to paper. "I'll do the work." The pen moved slowly, carefully, forming her name. Each letter felt like a promise, to Eli, to herself, to the community she wanted to serve. She'd seen too many offers that seemed too good to be true. But this wasn't a handout or a quick fix. This was a chance to transform her hard-won experience into real change. When she finished signing, Henry reached for the papers. Their eyes met across the table, his measured and evaluating, hers determined and clear. In that moment, Marissa understood. Her kindness in the rain hadn't just been about helping an old man home. It had been about proving who she was when no one was watching, when helping hurt, when doing the right thing came at a cost. That choice had opened a door. Now she just had to walk through it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the school playground as Marissa waited by the front gate. Her mind still spun from the morning's meeting, but seeing Eli's face brought her back to earth. He bounced down the steps, backpack swinging, then broke into a grin when he spotted her. "Mom, you're here!" He rushed over, surprise and joy mixing in his voice. Usually, Mrs. Green picked him up on weekdays. "Sure am, baby." Marissa caught his small hand in hers, holding it like an anchor to reality. His fingers were warm and sticky, probably from classroom snacks. "How was your day?" "We learned about butterflies," Eli said as they walked to the bus stop. "They start as caterpillars, but then they wrap up in this thing called a chrysalis and change completely." Marissa smiled at the timing of his lesson. That's kind of like what might be happening for us. Back home, Marissa heated leftover spaghetti, while Eli spread his homework across their small kitchen table. She watched him concentrate on math problems, his pencil moving carefully between numbers. The familiar sight steadied her racing thoughts. "Hey, E?" She sat down beside him. "I need to tell you something important." Eli looked up, his expression turning serious. At 8 years old, he'd already learned to read the weight in adult voices. "Remember last night when I was late picking you up from Mrs. Green's?" Marissa began. "Well, I was late because I stopped to help an older man walking in the rain. He was lost and cold, so I gave him a ride." "Was he okay?" Eli asked, concern crossing his young face. "He was. But here's the amazing part. This morning, he offered me a chance to go back to school, to learn how to help people in our neighborhood better, and get paid for it." Eli's pencil stopped moving. His face held that careful look she knew too well, the one that said he'd seen too many grown-up promises turn to dust. "Like when Ms. Taylor said she'd help you get that hospital job?" he asked quietly. Marissa's heart squeezed. 6 months ago, a supervisor had promised to recommend her for a better position, then left for another job without following through. "No, baby, this is different." She pulled out the folder from her bag, showing him the official papers. "See? This is real school, with real teachers. And the man who's helping us, he's made sure we'll have bus passes to get there, and good people to watch you when I'm in class." The phone rang, making them both jump. It was Ms. Pritchard, her voice crisp and efficient. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm calling to confirm your enrollment details. The Foundation has arranged child care with Little Scholars Academy. They're state-certified and located near your home. Your bus passes will arrive tomorrow morning by courier. Classes begin next Monday at 8 a.m. Marissa grabbed a pen, writing everything down while Eli watched. After hanging up, she spread her calendar on the table next to his homework. Reality settled in. She'd need to keep both jobs until she was sure the program would work. The cleaning job could shift to evenings, but the cashier hours were fixed. "Okay, let's figure this out." She drew lines across the calendar, mapping each hour. Morning classes here, work here, your school pickup. Her pen moved steadily, building a bridge between now and possibility. Eli leaned against her arm, watching. "That's a lot, Mom." "It is," she agreed, "but sometimes you have to work extra hard at the beginning to make things better later. Like those butterflies you learned about. They don't just pop out of nowhere. They have to push and struggle to get free." She dialed another number, her landlord. Her voice was stronger than usual as she explained her situation, using words like career training and professional certification that still felt new in her mouth. "I understand the rent is late," she said firmly. "I'm asking how many days exactly before you file the eviction paperwork. I need the specific number." The landlord remained unmoved, but Marissa wrote down the number. 14 days. It wasn't much, but it was concrete. She could work with concrete. Later that night, after Eli's bath and bedtime story, Marissa sat at the kitchen table with the program outline spread before her. The certification requirements looked daunting. Medical terminology, healthcare systems, social service navigation, cultural competency training. But underneath the big words, she recognized the work she'd been doing informally for years, helping people find doctors, understand paperwork, access services. Eli's soft breathing drifted from his bedroom as he slept. She glanced at his backpack, still decorated with the butterfly stickers his teacher had handed out that day. The timing felt like more than coincidence. "No wasted chance," she whispered, reading the first chapter title again. Her fingers traced the words, as if to make them more real. The old sedan sat lifeless in the dim morning light, refusing to turn over no matter how many times Marissa twisted the key. She hit the steering wheel in frustration, then immediately regretted it. This car had carried her through 3 years of double shifts. It didn't deserve her anger. "Not today," she whispered, gathering her heavy book bag. "Please, not today." The morning air bit through her jacket as she ran toward the bus stop, her shoes hitting the sidewalk in a desperate rhythm. She'd left early enough to drive, but hadn't planned for mechanical failure. Other commuters huddled under the metal shelter, their breath visible in the cold. Marissa checked her phone. 6:45 a.m. If the bus stayed on schedule, she could still make it. The bus squealed to a stop 10 minutes later, already crowded with morning workers. Marissa swiped her new pass, the one Henry's Foundation had provided, and found a spot to stand, gripping the overhead rail. Each stop and start made her stomach clench tighter. She couldn't be late, not on her first week. The training center occupied the ground floor of a renovated office building. Marissa hurried through the glass doors at 7:52 a.m., her heart racing but her clothes still neat. The classroom buzzed with conversation as other students settled into their seats. Most looked fresh from college, their notebooks crisp and new. A few wore scrubs or business casual, probably switching careers. Marissa smoothed her thrift store blazer and took a seat near the middle, not hiding but not drawing attention either. "Good morning, everyone," the instructor, Dr. Walsh, began. Today, we're covering social determinants of health, the factors that influence wellness before anyone ever sees a doctor. Marissa opened her notebook, purchased with her last cashier shift wages. The pages were still blank, waiting. Let's start with housing instability, Dr. Walsh continued. How does uncertain shelter affect healthcare access? The room fell quiet. Young hands stayed down, faces uncertain. Marissa's heart picked up speed as memories flooded in, calling clinics from payphones, using old addresses on forms, choosing between rent and prescriptions. Slowly, she raised her hand. Yes, Mrs. Johnson? When you don't have stable housing, Marissa began, her voice steady despite her nerves, you can't get consistent care. Doctors want permanent addresses for records and billing. If you move a lot, you lose paperwork. Sometimes you can't keep medicines that need refrigeration. And preventive care? That's not even on the radar when you're facing eviction. Dr. Walsh nodded, writing key points on the whiteboard. Excellent real-world example. What about food access? Again, Marissa's hand rose. Food deserts mean people rely on corner stores and fast food. But it's not just about location. It's timing. If you work multiple jobs, you might not have time to cook, even if you could buy fresh food. And food pantries? They often operate during working hours. The younger students turned to look at her with new interest. One woman in scrubs nodded in recognition. As the morning progressed, Marissa's experience illuminated topic after topic. She knew how medical debt could spiral, how lack of transportation affected appointment keeping, how shame kept people from seeking help until emergencies forced them. Her knowledge wasn't theoretical. It was lived, earned through years of navigating broken systems. When class ended, Dr. Walsh caught her eye. Mrs. Johnson, your insights today were invaluable. This program needs voices like yours. Marissa felt warmth spread through her chest as she gathered her books. The bus ride to Little Scholars Academy felt lighter than the morning journey. She found Eli in the reading corner, surrounded by books and clearly content. Mom! He jumped up, hugging her waist. Ms. Rachel helped me with division. That's wonderful, baby. Marissa signed the pickup sheet, noticing how professional and clean the facility looked. This was worlds away from the informal childcare arrangements she'd cobbled together before. At home, they spread their work across the kitchen table, her medical terminology flashcards next to his spelling list. Eli sounded out photosynthesis while she memorized hypertension. Quiz me, he said, covering his words with one hand. Okay. Necessary. Necessary, he spelled carefully. Now you do one of yours. Hit me. That one about blood pressure. Hypertension. Hypertension. They worked until dinner time when Marissa's phone buzzed. Her second job supervisor was calling about her missed shift. She had mandatory orientation tonight instead. The lost wages would make next week tight, maybe impossible. She stared at the phone, then at Eli's homework, then at her own studies. Standing up, Marissa walked to the kitchen sink. She found a piece of paper and a marker, writing in clear letters, "Finish what you started." The note went up right where she'd see it every morning. A reminder that some sacrifices were investments. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marissa stared at her phone in the empty hallway. The message glowed back at her. Local News 5, interested in your inspiring journey from Good Samaritan to scholarship recipient. Available for interview this week. She pressed her back against the cool wall, letting out a long breath. 3 weeks into the program, and suddenly everyone wanted to know her story. It had started with whispers in class, then social media posts, and now this, actual news coverage. Inside the classroom, she could hear chairs scraping as students packed up after their morning session. Marissa had just aced another role-play exercise, demonstrating how to help clients navigate insurance paperwork. Dr. Walsh had called her performance exemplary. "Mrs. Johnson?" Speaking of Dr. Walsh, she appeared in the doorway. "The Foundation representatives were impressed with your presentation today. They're talking about using your approach as a model for the program." "Thank you," Marissa said, tucking her phone away. "I just showed what I wish someone had shown me years ago." "That's exactly why you're succeeding here. Real experience matters." As other students filtered past, Marissa noticed their glances. Some smiled warmly, while others quickly looked away. She'd seen the comments online. "Fairy tale story," and "must be nice to get handpicked by a billionaire." The attention made her skin prickle. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ms. Pritchard, Henry's assistant. "Mr. Henry requests a brief meeting tomorrow morning before your classes. Coffee in the Foundation office?" Marissa typed back a quick acceptance. These check-ins with Henry had become regular, though brief. He never wasted words, and he seemed genuinely interested in her progress rather than her publicity value. The Foundation office occupied a quiet corner of the building. Two staff members Marissa didn't recognize stood in the lobby, taking photos of the training center's logo wall. One lifted her camera as Marissa passed, but lowered it when Marissa shook her head slightly. Henry sat in a simple chair by the window, not behind the imposing desk. "Marissa," he said warmly, "how are the classes?" "Good. Great, actually. I'm maintaining a 95 average. I saw the reports." He gestured for her to sit. "And I've seen the media attention." Marissa's shoulders tensed. "I haven't responded to any of it. Nor should you feel obligated to. This opportunity is yours, earned through character, not a publicity stunt. Though I understand the Foundation's marketing team is enthusiastic. They followed me to lunch yesterday," Marissa admitted. "Wanted photos of natural interaction with classmates." Henry's expression darkened slightly. "I'll speak to them. Your focus should be on learning, not performing for cameras." After the meeting, Marissa felt lighter. She spent her lunch break apartment hunting on her phone, allowing herself to imagine a future with more space than their current one-room rental. A listing caught her eye. A two-bedroom with actual closets, walking distance from a good elementary school. The rent was high, but maybe possible with her future salary. She clicked through the photos, picturing Eli doing homework at a real desk instead of the kitchen counter. Maybe they could even get him a proper bed to replace the fold-out couch he'd been sleeping on. "That one looks nice," said a classmate, Sarah, peeking over her shoulder. "Are you moving?" "Hoping to, once I'm certified and working." "I bet the Foundation would help with the deposit," Sarah said carefully. "You know, since you're their star student and all." The comment stung, though Sarah probably meant well. "I'd rather do it on my own," Marissa said, closing the browser. That evening, Eli sprawled on their worn carpet with his science project, a model of the solar system made from painted styrofoam balls. Marissa helped him attach Neptune to its wire orbit, while trying not to let her anxiety show. "Mom, are you going to be on TV?" he asked suddenly. "Who told you that?" "Mrs. Green said she saw something about you on Facebook. She said you're famous now." Marissa set down the hot glue gun. "I'm not famous, baby. Some people just want to write about the school program I'm in." "Because of the rich man who helped us?" "Because of hard work," she corrected gently. "The help opened a door, but we're walking through it ourselves." Eli nodded, carefully balancing his wobbly solar system. "Like how you helped me start this. But I'm doing the planets myself?" "Exactly like that." Marissa smiled, amazed at how children could simplify complex things. Later, after Eli was asleep, Marissa allowed herself a moment of pride. Her test scores were strong. Her presentations impressed the instructors. Even her old car had started behaving better since she could afford proper maintenance, For the first time in years, she felt like she was building something solid, not just surviving day to day. A soft sound at the door interrupted her thoughts. Something sliding under it. A letter. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a certified mail sticker across the top. Marissa's stomach clenched before she even reached for it. The kitchen light cast a yellow glow over the formal letterhead as Marissa unfolded the certified letter. Beside her, Eli hummed softly, his colored pencils scratching against paper as he worked on a drawing. The normal evening sounds, the neighbor's muffled TV, traffic outside, the old refrigerator's quiet rattle, seemed to fade away as she began reading. "Dear Ms. Johnson," the letter began in cold, professional type. "This notice is to inform you that your sponsored placement in the Community Health Navigator certification program has been temporarily suspended pending review." Marissa's hands tightened on the paper. The words blurred, then sharpened. Background verification concerns, financial history, association with disputed accounts, reputational risk assessment. She forced herself to breathe slowly, not wanting to alarm Eli. The letter detailed something from 3 years ago, when Marcus, her ex, had been living with them sporadically. He'd used her address without permission, opened utility accounts in her name. She'd discovered it when collection notices started arriving, but by then Marcus was long gone. She'd fought the charges, filed police reports, spent months untangling the mess. No charges were ever filed against her, but the paper trail existed, and now it was being used against her. "Mom, look!" Eli held up his drawing, stick figures standing in front of what looked like a house. "That's us in our new apartment. When we move." Marissa swallowed hard. "It's beautiful, baby. Why don't you add some trees? Make it look nice and green?" As he returned to coloring, her phone buzzed. A local news number she didn't recognize left a voicemail. "Ms. Johnson, we're working on a story about concerns raised regarding your foundation scholarship. We'd appreciate your comment on allegations of past financial impropriety." Her hands shook as she opened social media. The rumors were already spreading like poison. Knew it was too good to be true. Should have checked her background first. Probably scammed that poor old man in the rain. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. She stepped into the bathroom, turned on the faucet to mask any sound, and called Miss Pritchard's direct line. "Marissa!" Miss Pritchard's voice was carefully neutral. "I was about to call you. What's happening? The letter says suspended. But I'm halfway through the program. My grades are perfect. The board has concerns. They need time to review the situation. What about Henry? He knew I wasn't perfect when he chose me. He said this was about character, not background checks." A pause. "Mr. Henry is currently unavailable. He's traveling on business." "Convenient timing," Marissa said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in her voice. "Marissa!" Ms. Pritchard's tone softened slightly. "Don't make public statements. Don't engage with media. Let the process work." "Process?" Marissa's laugh held no humor. "You mean let them bury me? Pretend I'm guilty of something I fought to fix years ago? The board has a responsibility to protect the foundation's reputation. And I have a responsibility to my son." Marissa's voice cracked. "I promised him things would be different." After hanging up, Marissa splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. The woman who looked back seemed smaller somehow, diminished. All those weeks of growing confidence, of walking taller, feeling worthy, gone in one certified letter. She returned to the kitchen where Eli was adding the finishing touches to his drawing. "Mom, can I hang this on the fridge?" "Of course, baby." She helped him position it under a magnet next to his latest spelling test with its bright red A. "Is your homework done?" she asked, trying to keep her voice normal. "Almost. Just one more math problem." He looked up at her, his brown eyes serious. "Are you okay? You look sad." Marissa sat down beside him. "Work stuff got complicated," she said carefully. "Sometimes grown-up things get messy, even when you're trying your best." "Did you make a mistake?" "No. Someone else made mistakes that affect me. But I'm going to fix it. Like when Tommy blamed me for knocking over the paint in art class? Even though he did it? Something like that." Marissa squeezed his shoulder. "But don't worry. We're going to be fine." Later, after Eli was tucked into his fold-out bed, Marissa sat alone at the kitchen table. The letter lay before her like a verdict. She thought about all the mornings she'd arrived early to class, all the late nights studying while Eli slept, all the careful budgeting to make this work. She thought about Henry walking in the rain, testing people's character. Had that all been a game to him? Her phone kept lighting up with notifications, more news inquiries, more social media tags, more whispers becoming shouts. She turned it face down. The apartment felt heavy with silence. On the fridge, Eli's drawing showed their imagined future. A proper home, stability, dignity. All the things she'd finally dared to reach for. Marissa picked up the letter again. Her hands trembled as she folded it precisely along its creases, each bend a small act of control when everything else felt chaotic. The Foundation's logo stared back at her, embossed and official, claiming the power to judge her worth. "I'm still going tomorrow," she whispered into the quiet kitchen. The words came out shaky, but grew stronger as she repeated them. She thought of Eli's faith in her, of all the times she'd told him to stand up after falling. The letter went into her bag, next to her textbooks and carefully maintained class notes. Tomorrow would come, with its stares and whispers, its judgments and assumptions. But she would be there, in her seat, proving something, if only to herself and her son. The morning air bit through Marissa's thin jacket as she stood at the bus stop, clutching her textbooks. Her stomach growled. She'd given her last granola bar to Eli for breakfast. The Foundation's letter sat heavy in her bag, but her student ID still worked. Until someone physically stopped her, she'd keep showing up. Other commuters huddled nearby, checking phones and watches. A woman Marissa recognized from class glanced at her, then quickly looked away. The story had spread. Marissa lifted her chin and stared straight ahead. The bus arrived with a whoosh of brakes. Marissa counted out exact change. No more prepaid pass, and found a seat near the middle. She opened her textbook, focusing on today's material about emergency response protocols. The words blurred as exhaustion crept in. She'd been up late recalculating their budget, trying to stretch what was left of her savings. In class, Marissa sat in her usual spot despite the whispers. When the instructor asked questions, she raised her hand anyway. During group work, she noticed others hesitating to partner with her. Fine. She'd work alone. "Ms. Johnson," her instructor said after class. "A moment?" Marissa braced herself, but the woman just handed her a graded paper. "Excellent analysis of community resource mapping. Whatever else is happening, your work speaks for itself." The validation stung almost worse than criticism. Marissa managed a nod before hurrying out. Dark clouds had gathered during class. As her bus approached her neighborhood, fat raindrops splattered against the windows. Thunder rolled overhead. Marissa pulled her jacket tight and jogged from the stop toward home, but stopped short at the scene before her. Water pooled in the street, backing up from overwhelmed storm drains. Several buildings, including her apartment complex, stood dark. No lights in any windows. A small crowd had gathered in the parking lot, voices raised in panic and confusion. "My insulin's in the fridge," Mrs. Torres from 3B was saying. "It'll go bad." "I can't climb 4 flights in the dark," Mr. Washington protested. "My heart can't take it." "My baby needs formula, And I can't see to mix it. A young mother bounced a crying infant. Marissa's training kicked in. She moved to the center of the group and spoke in the clear, commanding tone she'd practiced in class. Everyone listen up. The crowd quieted. First priority is safety. Who has elderly or disabled neighbors who might be stuck upstairs? Hands went up. Marissa pointed to some younger residents. You three, grab flashlights and check on them. Work in pairs. Mrs. Green has a master key. She's in 2A. She turned to a teenager with a charged phone. Call emergency services. Report the flooding and power outage. Tell them we have vulnerable residents who need assistance. To others, who has battery packs? Gather them at the community center. It has a backup generator. We can set up a charging station. People began moving with purpose. Marissa spotted Mrs. Torres trembling over her insulin. The community center has a refrigerator on generator power. We'll move temperature-sensitive medications there. My baby, the young mother pleaded. I have bottled water in my apartment, Marissa said. We'll use that for formula. Does anyone else have bottled water to share? Several people nodded. Marissa organized a water collection point, showing the mother how to properly mix formula by flashlight. Rain pounded harder. Marissa's clothes were soaked, but she kept moving. She helped Mr. Washington navigate the dark stairwell, one step at a time. She coordinated with arriving emergency responders, giving them clear updates on resident locations and medical needs. A shout came from the second floor. Mrs. Green fell! Marissa ran up the stairs, flashlight beam bouncing. She found Mrs. Green sprawled in the hallway, shaken but conscious. Tried to check on Ms. Ruby, Mrs. Green explained. Got dizzy in the dark. I've got you. Marissa helped her up, supporting her weight. Let's get you downstairs where it's safer. You sound like a proper professional now, Mrs. Green said as they descended slowly. All official-like. Just using what I learned. Marissa's voice caught. While I still can. Honey, they can take away the paper, but they can't take away what's in your head. Mrs. Green squeezed her arm. Or your heart. They reached the ground floor where emergency lights now cast a weak glow. The community center had become an impromptu shelter. People shared snacks and phone chargers. Children played cards by flashlight. The young mother had finally gotten her baby to sleep. Marissa moved through the crowd, checking on everyone. Elderly residents with their rescued medications, families with small children, people with mobility issues. She answered questions calmly, directed resources where needed, and kept panic from spreading. Her training manual was getting wet, but she referenced it anyway, checking protocols for power outages, reviewing signs of anxiety and shock, documenting which residents might need follow-up care. You're good at this, the emergency response coordinator told her. We could use more community health workers with your instincts. Marissa just nodded and moved on to the next task. She wasn't doing this for praise or attention. She was doing it because people needed help, and she knew how to give it. The rain continued falling, turning the parking lot into a shallow lake. Across the street, partially hidden by shadow and an black umbrella, a solitary figure stood watching. Henry's face was etched with something deeper than simple observation. A heavy recognition of what he'd almost thrown away, and the cost of doubting someone's character once it had been proven true. But Marissa never saw him. She was too busy holding a flashlight, while an elderly resident counted out her evening pills, too focused on checking that the temporary charging station was working, too concerned with making sure everyone had what they needed to make it through the night. She did what she'd always done, what she'd continue doing whether anyone noticed or not. She helped anyway. The late afternoon sky remained heavy with clouds, but the worst of the storm had passed. Emergency vehicles' red and blue lights pulsed against wet pavement, casting shifting shadows across gathered residents. Near the community center entrance, people huddled in small groups, sharing blankets and swapping stories about the flooding. Marissa stood by a fold-out table, organizing donated supplies into categories: bottled water, snacks, basic first aid items. Her clothes were still damp, and exhaustion pulled at her shoulders, but she kept moving. A small notepad beside her listed each resident's immediate needs. Mrs. Torres needed her medication refrigerated. The Martinez family needed diapers. Mr. Washington required assistance with his oxygen tank. "You've really thought of everything," commented a paramedic, scanning her notes. "Just trying to keep track," Marissa replied, adjusting the flashlight propped against a water bottle. Her voice was hoarse from hours of giving directions and reassurance. The community center hummed with activity. Children dozed on chairs while parents spoke in hushed voices. Emergency crews moved efficiently through the space, checking on elderly residents. The young mother, whose baby had needed formula earlier, gave Marissa a tired smile from her corner. A police officer approached with another update. "Power company says it might be tomorrow before everything's restored. We're arranging temporary shelter for anyone who needs it." Marissa nodded, already mentally sorting who would need transportation assistance. She was so focused on adding notes that she didn't notice the figure approaching until a familiar voice spoke. "Ms. Johnson." She froze. Without looking up, she knew it was Henry. Her hands tightened on her pen, knuckles white with tension. The past weeks of uncertainty and shame rushed back. The letter, the accusations, the silence from his office. "Not now," she said quietly, still writing. "I'm busy helping people who actually need me. Please." His voice carried none of its usual authority. 5 minutes. Marissa finally looked up. Henry stood there in a rain-dampened suit, his usual commanding presence softened by what looked like genuine regret. She glanced around at her neighbors, at the emergency crews, at the children sleeping on chairs. 5 minutes, she agreed, turning to a volunteer. "Watch the supplies table? I'll be right back." They moved to a quieter corner of the room, where the emergency lights cast long shadows. Marissa crossed her arms, protective armor against whatever new disappointment might come. "I saw how you handled the crisis," Henry began. "Did you?" Marissa's voice shook with barely contained anger. "Were you watching that too? Another test? Because the last one wasn't humiliating enough? You have every right to be angry. Where were you?" The words burst out, sharp with hurt. "When that letter came? When people started calling me a fraud? When everything I'd worked for just disappeared?" She took a shuddering breath. "You talked about seeing real character. But the moment someone questioned mine, you vanished." Henry didn't interrupt or defend himself. He simply listened, his face grave, as Marissa's words poured out. "Do you know what it's like," she continued, "to finally believe you might have a real chance, then watch it slip away because of something someone else did? To have your whole past used against you, even though you survived it?" A young boy's cry interrupted them. Someone had dropped their flashlight, and the dark had scared him. Marissa automatically turned toward the sound, but another resident was already there, offering comfort. Henry waited until she looked back at him. "The board review wasn't solely my decision," he said carefully. "But you're right. I allowed it to continue. I needed to know if your kindness was conditional." "Conditional?" Marissa's laugh was bitter. "On what? Having enough money? Being comfortable? Because those have never been options for me." "No," Henry said softly. "I needed to know if you would keep helping others even when no one was watching, even when there was no reward, even when it cost you everything." Marissa thought of the past weeks, still attending classes, still studying, still showing up. Today's crisis response. So it was another test. An unfair one, Henry admitted. One I regret. Watching you lead today, seeing how naturally you stepped up, It proved what I already knew but needed to confirm. You help because it's who you are, not what you might gain. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a folder. I personally investigated the background issue, traced the paper trail to your ex-partner, found documentation clearing your name. His voice hardened. I won't let systems punish you for surviving someone else's mess. Marissa stared at the folder but didn't take it. Why should I trust you again? Because I'm not just offering to restore the opportunity, Henry said. I'm here to apologize. I let fear of being wrong about you override what I knew was right. That caused you pain you didn't deserve. A commotion near the supplies table drew Marissa's attention. Someone needed help organizing donations. Her body automatically turned toward the need, and Henry noticed. Even now, he said quietly, your instinct is to help. It's not an instinct, Marissa corrected him. It's a choice, every time. Henry nodded slowly. That's exactly why I'm here. Tomorrow morning, I want you to come with me to meet the board. Marissa tensed. I won't beg them to believe in me. No, Henry agreed. You're not coming as a charity case or someone who needs their approval. You're coming as the leader you already are. The leader everyone here sees clearly. The emergency coordinator called Marissa's name, needing her input on overnight arrangements. She glanced at Henry, then at the folder he still held. Your 5 minutes are up, she said. I have work to do here. The elevator doors opened onto the 45th floor, revealing a corridor of polished marble and gleaming wood. Marissa's reflection ghosted along brass-trimmed walls as she followed Ms. Pritchard toward double doors marked boardroom. Her second-hand blazer felt thin against the building's aggressive air conditioning, but she kept her spine straight. They're waiting, Ms. Pritchard said softly, pausing at the entrance. She gave Marissa an encouraging nod before pushing the doors open. 12 faces turned toward her. The board members sat around a massive oval table, their expressions ranging from polite disinterest to barely concealed skepticism. Leather chairs creaked as they shifted, papers rustled, and someone cleared their throat. Henry stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding even in silence. Ms. Johnson, please join us, said a silver-haired woman who introduced herself as the board chair, Dr. Elizabeth Warner. We understand you'd like to address certain concerns. Marissa took her seat, conscious of every eye studying her clothing, her posture, her worthiness to be in this room. She placed her folder, containing every document she could find about the utility dispute, carefully on the table's gleaming surface. Thank you for meeting with me, Marissa began, proud that her voice remained steady. I know your time is valuable. A man in wire-rimmed glasses consulted his tablet. We're reviewing some concerning information about your background, Ms. Johnson. Issues that could impact donor confidence and program integrity. The Foundation's reputation is paramount, added another board member. We must maintain strict standards for beneficiary selection. Marissa noticed how they used careful words to dress up their judgment. She remembered Henry's advice from earlier. Don't let their language intimidate you. Speak your truth, plainly. I understand reputation matters, Marissa said. So let me be clear about mine. She opened her folder with steady hands. 6 years ago, my ex-partner used my address for utilities without my knowledge. When he abandoned the account, the company came after me. I was working 2 jobs then, too, raising a toddler alone. I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight it. She met their eyes one by one. Being poor means you're guilty until proven innocent. Being poor means one mistake, even someone else's mistake, follows you forever. Being poor means systems assume the worst about you, no matter how hard you work or how honest you are. The room stayed silent. Even the paper shuffling stopped. I brought documentation, Marissa continued, sliding copies forward. Court records showing I was never charged with fraud. Proof I set up a payment plan for bills that weren't mine, because I couldn't fight them. References from employers who know my character. Dr. Warner examined the papers through her reading glasses. These circumstances are unfortunate. However, the Foundation must consider. If I may, Henry interrupted, standing. His voice filled the room with quiet authority. I've witnessed Ms. Johnson's character firsthand, not through background checks or paperwork, but through actions under pressure. He described the neighborhood crisis during the storm. Marissa organizing emergency response, tracking vulnerable residents, coordinating with first responders. She led without being asked. She served without reward. She showed exactly the kind of practical leadership our programs should cultivate. Admirable, said the man with wire-rimmed glasses. But our guidelines need revision, Henry cut in. What good is a foundation claiming to lift people up if we punish them for surviving? What message do we send when we demand perfection from those who've had to fight for everything? Marissa watched the board members exchange glances. Henry wasn't finished. I propose we not only reinstate Ms. Johnson's sponsorship, but expand it. Full tuition coverage, a paid foundation internship, leadership development training. She's already proven she can translate empathy into action. Let's give her the tools to do more. The budget implications, someone began, will be covered by my personal guarantee, Henry said firmly. Unless, of course, you'd prefer I redirect my funding to organizations with clearer moral vision. The threat hung in the air. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Marissa kept her face neutral, though her heart hammered. Dr. Warner removed her glasses. Perhaps we should put it to a vote. Perhaps we should, Henry agreed. But first, I'd like Ms. Johnson to share her vision for what she'd do with this opportunity. Marissa hadn't expected this opening, but she was ready. She spoke about creating accessible health navigation services in underserved neighborhoods, about training other community members to advocate for themselves, about building bridges between medical systems and people who'd lost trust in institutions. I know what it's like to feel invisible, she concluded. To need help, but not know how to get it. That experience isn't a weakness. It's expertise. I can reach people others can't, because I've walked in their shoes. The board vote that followed felt almost anticlimactic. Under Henry's steady gaze, they approved the expanded program with only 2 dissenting votes. Dr. Warner herself made the motion to proceed immediately with reinstatement. As the meeting concluded, board members gathered their materials and filed out. A few nodded to Marissa. Their earlier skepticism softened. Henry touched her shoulder briefly as he passed, a quiet gesture of support. Marissa remained seated for a moment, her hands folded in her lap. Relief made her dizzy, but determination steadied her. She thought of Eli, of Mrs. Green, of her neighbors during the storm. She thought of all the times she'd helped anyway, when helping hurt. Now she had a chance to help with real resources behind her. Ms. Pritchard appeared at her side. Ready to review the new paperwork? Marissa stood, squaring her shoulders once more. Yes, she said simply. I'm ready. Morning light filtered through freshly cleaned windows as Marissa turned the key in the lock. The door swung open with a satisfying click, revealing the transformed space that still took her breath away. New vinyl flooring gleamed under LED lights, replacing the cracked tiles and flickering fluorescence that had marked this abandoned storefront for years. She inhaled deeply, fresh paint and possibility. The renovation had taken 3 months, but every detail felt right. The welcoming lobby with comfortable chairs, the private consultation rooms with sound dampening, the small medical station equipped for basic screenings. Educational posters in Spanish and English brightened the walls, and a children's corner held books and quiet activities. Marissa walked through her morning routine, switching on computers and checking the day's schedule on her tablet. The foundation's logo shared wall space with local partner organizations, a visual reminder that this center belonged to the community first. Mrs. Green arrived precisely at 8, settling behind the front desk with her thermos of tea. "Morning, baby," she called out, arranging her family photos next to the sign-in computer. "Ready for another day?" "Always," Marissa smiled, helping Mrs. Green adjust her chair. The older woman had insisted on volunteering 3 mornings a week, saying she needed to keep useful. In truth, her presence gave the center credibility. Neighbors trusted Mrs. Green's judgment. The first clients wouldn't arrive for another hour, giving Marissa time to review files. She'd hired 2 part-time health navigators from the neighborhood, both completing certification like she had. Training them felt like passing forward Henry's investment in her. Eli's backpack appeared in her office doorway before his face. "Mom, I finished the science homework." He was growing so fast. His school uniform pants already showed his ankles. "That's great, honey. Show me while I get these papers organized." She cleared space at the small desk they'd set up in the corner of her office. It wasn't fancy, but it was his space. Stable, predictable, safe. Eli spread out his assignment, explaining the water cycle diagram with enthusiasm. Marissa noticed he'd drawn extra arrows and notes in the margins, the way she did with her own work files. "Very thorough," she praised. "Just like a real researcher." "Ms. Thompson says I might get to present it to the class," he said, carefully storing the paper in his folder. "Can I help sort the donation boxes before school?" The monthly resource drive had brought in winter coats and sealed personal care items. Marissa checked her watch. They had time. "Sure, but shoes stay off the coffee table this time." They worked together, creating neat piles while Mrs. Green called out good morning to the elderly walking group that used the center's back room for exercise class. The routine felt solid, earned. Marissa remembered nights of counting coins for gas, of apologizing to Mrs. Green for late pickups, of holding her breath every time the car started. Now she had bus passes for clients who needed them, a small emergency fund for families in crisis, and partnerships with local doctors willing to work with payment plans. Her phone buzzed. A text from Henry. "Monthly check-in today? 2 p.m.? She typed back confirmation. Henry's visits had grown less frequent, but more focused. He asked sharp questions about sustainability, about training new leaders, about creating systems that would outlast his involvement. "You're building something larger than one person's generosity," he'd told her last month. "Make it strong enough to stand alone." The morning unfolded steadily. Marissa helped a young mother navigate insurance paperwork, connected a diabetic senior with medication assistance, and coordinated transportation for a child's specialist appointment. Between clients, she reviewed grant applications with her staff, teaching them to translate community needs into funding language. Around noon, she caught movement in the doorway, a teenager shifting nervously, clearly wanting to speak but unsure how to start. Marissa recognized that hesitation. She'd felt it herself, standing in aid offices where judgment came before help. "Come on in," she said warmly, moving away from her desk to sit in the more casual chair arrangement by the window. "I'm Marissa. What brings you by today?" The girl twisted her sleeve. "My friend said," she said, "you help people figure stuff out? Without making it weird?" "That's what we're here for," Marissa agreed. "Want to tell me what needs figuring out?" Slowly, the story emerged. A complicated tangle of family medical bills, school absence policies, and an ill grandmother needing care. Marissa listened, taking notes, asking gentle questions. This was why the center mattered. Not just for direct help, but for dignity in the asking. They were still talking when Eli returned from school, letting himself in quietly with his key card. He settled at his desk without interrupting, pulling out homework. Marissa felt a flash of pride. He'd grown more secure, more confident. He no longer asked anxiously when she'd be home or worried about next month's rent. The stability had given him room to be a child again. Mrs. Green poked her head in. Reminder: that new hospital liaison is coming at 3 to discuss their community outreach program. Thanks, Mrs. G. Could you pull the visitor stats from last month? They'll want to see our numbers. The older woman nodded. Already printed. And I made coffee. The good kind, not that break room stuff. Marissa smiled. They were building something real here. Not just services, but relationships. Trust. Hope with solid ground under it. Rain started falling outside, gentle at first, then steadier. The familiar pattern against the windows drew Marissa's attention. She remembered another rainy evening, an old man struggling along the sidewalk, a choice between self-protection and helping anyway. The memory didn't sting anymore. It had become foundation instead of fear. The steady rhythm of windshield wipers marked time as Marissa navigated through the darkening streets. Her old sedan hummed along reliably. No more warning lights, no more mysterious rattles. The maintenance schedule Henry had insisted on including in her support package had transformed the car from a source of constant anxiety into a dependable partner. She'd just finished a late meeting with potential donors, the kind of conversation that still felt strange sometimes. Today, she'd presented statistics about the wellness center's impact. Families served, medical bills negotiated, crisis interventions completed. The numbers told a story of change, but Marissa knew the real victories lived in smaller moments. A mother's relieved smile when medication came through, a child's proud grin over improved health scores, an elder's dignity preserved through compassionate care. The rain intensified, sheets of water making the streetlights blur. Marissa adjusted the defrost settings, remembering how she used to pray the heat would work on nights like this. Now the warm air flowed steadily, and her gas gauge showed more than half full. Such simple things, but they still made her pause in gratitude. At a red light, movement caught her attention. Through the rain-streaked passenger window, she saw a man struggling along the sidewalk. He was maybe 50. Wearing a thin jacket that offered little protection from the downpour. One hand clutched a plastic shopping bag, while the other gripped a metal cane, helping him keep balance on the slick concrete. Each step looked painful and deliberate. The sight hit Marissa like a physical force. Just over a year ago, she'd seen Henry in almost the same spot, in almost the same condition. The memory was so sharp she could still feel the weight of that choice. Stop and risk everything, or drive past and protect her fragile stability. Without hesitation, Marissa flipped on her hazard lights and pulled to the curb. She pressed the button to lower the passenger window, letting in the sound of rain. "Hey there," she called out, keeping her voice gentle but clear. "Would you like a ride somewhere?" "It's coming down pretty hard." The man stopped, peering through the rain at her car. His face showed the same internal debate she'd seen in Henry. Pride wrestling with need, suspicion tangling with hope. His clothes were decent but worn, suggesting someone who worked hard to maintain appearances despite limited means. "I don't want to mess up your car," he said finally, gesturing at his dripping clothes. "But thank you, ma'am." Marissa smiled, the warm smile she used with nervous first-time clients at the center. "Nothing in here can't dry out. Please, let me help. Where are you headed?" He hesitated another moment, then nodded. Marissa reached across to open the door, and he eased himself into the seat with careful movements that suggested joint pain or an old injury. The shopping bag settled between his feet. She glimpsed what looked like prescription bottles inside. "I'm Marissa," she offered, pulling carefully back into traffic. "Where can I take you?" "James Wilson," he replied, his voice carrying the slight drawl of someone who'd grown up local, but tried to smooth it out. "I'm over on Maple Street, the apartment complex near the Methodist Church." He paused, then added, "I usually drive, but my car's in the shop. Couldn't put off picking up the prescriptions, though." Marissa nodded, recognizing the familiar calculation of necessary risks. "Maple Street's not far. Do you have someone expecting you? Family should know you're safe in this weather." "My daughter might call later," James said. "She worries, especially since the arthritis got worse. But she's got her own family to manage up in Charlotte." The conversation felt like an echo, but now Marissa was on the other side of it. She knew the right questions to ask, the way to show interest without prying. "That's tough, managing health stuff long distance. Does your doctor have a good system for prescription refills?" James sighed. "It's complicated. Insurance changed again. Had to switch some medications. Still figuring out what's covered." Marissa kept her voice casual, while her heart squeezed with recognition. "You know, I work at that new wellness center over on Grant Avenue. We have staff who help navigate insurance issues, find medication assistance programs. All free, no strings attached." She gestured to the glove compartment. "Would you mind checking in there?" "I should have some of our cards." James retrieved a business card, studying it under the passing streetlights. The center's logo was simple but professional, with contact information and a list of basic services. Marissa had designed it herself, making sure it looked legitimate without being intimidating. "I've heard about this place," he said slowly. "Friend of mine said you helped his mother get into that new senior dental program." "That's us," Marissa confirmed, turning onto Maple Street. "We're open Monday through Saturday, and you can just walk in. No appointments needed for initial consultations." She pulled up to the apartment complex, positioning the car so James would have a shorter walk to the covered entrance. He tucked the card carefully into his wallet. "I appreciate the ride, Ms. Marissa. And maybe I'll stop by the center next week." "We'll be there," she assured him, watching to make sure he made it safely to the building's door. As she drove away, the rain continued its steady fall. But it felt different now, cleansing instead of threatening, familiar instead of fierce. Marissa thought about Henry, about choices and changes and circles closing. She hadn't offered James a business empire or a miraculous transformation. She'd simply given what she could: a dry ride, a kind ear, and a path to possible help. The sedan's headlights cut through the rain, guiding her home where Eli waited with Mrs. Green. Her son would want to tell her about his day, show her his latest art project, maybe ask for help with math homework. They'd eat dinner at their small table, plan for tomorrow, and feel secure in the knowledge that their lights would stay on, their home was stable, and their future had room to grow. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.